Boy in the front row with his hand up, I have an erection right now, is that normal? Sex ed teachers of Reddit, what is the most awkward, cringeworthy question you've had to answer in your class? We had a girl in our class ask our science teacher when she lost her virginity. She answered, when I first had sex. Not a teacher, but we had note cards and wrote questions anonymously. One asked, if both partners have long pubes, will they get tangled? How do you untangle them? And honestly, I never thought of that. A nun taught us sex ed. One of the lads asks her if, when you stick it in, do you just hold it there or do you wiggle it or what? She turned red and informed him it was an inappropriate question. A kid in my class asked what is the stuff that girls orgasm out of if males are sperm. Teacher said that girls don't ejaculate. The kid responded, yes they do, I've seen it on the internet. Once asked the question to a group of Year 9 students, what do you do if you want to have sex and you can't find a condom? Student 1, male, surely you can find something in your house. Maybe cling film. Student 2, female, yeah. Or maybe tinfoil. Goddamn tinfoil. My daughter is a high school health teacher. When I told her there's a Reddit question directed at her, she gave me these. Why do I feel happy in my pants when I see a girl? Is it true that a guy's balls will explode if he doesn't come? Most common question, can you get pregnant from anal sex? Not a teacher, but this happened years ago in my old elementary school and I heard about it. Teacher, remember girls, it is always okay to say no to sex. Girl, can I even say no to my daddy? He went to jail. I am not a teacher. Back in grade school, one of my classmates asked the teacher during the sex education lessons about why his dad put fingers in his butthole, then made him cry, but still loves him. The student disappeared the next day. I only realized it years later. So I teach high school biology and there is the sex unit. The public school district I teach in is super conservative. So I did my lesson, no one asked questions. One boy came up to me and said he was uncut and he had some white stuff that smelled and what he could do to get rid of it. So I told him what it was, smegma, and he needed to ask his parents for that procedure. Not a teacher, but in grade 7 we had a box where you could anonymously submit questions. 1 or 2 would be read at the end of class each day. My teacher pulled a question that read, what are anal beads? The whole class burst out laugh, including our teacher, and he just kinda threw away the piece of paper and said that we all clearly knew what anal beads were, but just in case they are sex toys. We were very promptly dismissed after that. Not a sex ed teacher, but a 7th grade classroom teacher. I had one boy ask me, Mr. 4X, you know boobs, right, as he cupped his hands in front of his chest. I nodded. I'm sorry, I know this is a bad word, he said, but I don't know any other way to say it. A boobs, full of cum. I'm a teacher in year 6, 10 plus 11 years olds, in the UK. It's the first year that children really learn and talk about sex in school. We had arrived at the actual sexual intercourse lesson where we focus on the science of conception. One boy out his hand up and said that there were, of course, sounding worldly wise, ways of having sex without getting pregnant. I nodded approvingly as I thought we were going to start talking about contraception. Yes, he says, you can stick your penis between a woman's breasts and then come on her chest. I suppose he isn't wrong. Hard to get pregnant like that. Took me by surprise though. Not a teacher here, but an amusing one from when I was at school. The teacher, who was young, female, and generally drooled over by the boys, was demonstrating how to put on a condom, with a large plastic phallic object to demonstrate on. The class was pretty raucous, so she called out one of the more show-off boys to come to the front and demonstrate. She handed him the condom in its wrapper and put the phallus on the desk. She told him to put it on one-handed. He stupidly asked why only one hand. Completely straight-faced she said, because your other hand is busy. During our sex education in the early 90s, which amounted to 1 hour of dividing the boys and girls of each grade. taking them into their respective classrooms, and going over very broad topics. We were allowed to anonymously ask additional questions we had by writing them on a flashcard and passing them to the front. I asked what would happen if a boy peed inside a girl. I watched as my flashcard was silently read by the teacher, then unceremoniously thrown away without being answered. To this day, I still don't know. I teach 11 to 13-year-olds. All subjects. I was explaining the functions of spontaneous erection to a group of 40 12-year-old boys. As you develop, and even into your adulthood, you will sometimes develop an erection at times that seem inappropriate. Just know that it's normal, and while it can be embarrassing, it does not necessarily mean that you are sexually attracted to anything or anyone at that time. Boy in the front row with his hand up, I have an erection right now, is that normal? One of my favorite moments from my high school days. We had health as part of our P class, and they always got the P teachers to teach it. And of course 1 week of it was sex ed. We had this dumb football coach who basically read us the textbook for a week rather than actually deal with the subject. Not really because of any squeamishness, but mostly because it wasn't related to football, and that's all he cared about. I didn't know it was possible to make sex boring until I sat through that week of school. All of us were dozing off or just daydreaming. But the last day, someone raised their hand and said, "Hey coach, how do you have sex? What's the process?" Obviously, they were messing with the guy. The coach said, okay, so you got a donut and a banana, and goes on to tell us about how that would work. It was so bizarre. I'm not a teacher, but in 8th grade we finally had a health class at my private Christian junior high. The teacher was determined to do a correct and thorough job despite the obvious constraints put on her by the schools, and the parents paying the tuition, of course, morals, ideology. She got to the last day, so far so good. We learned all the proper names for stuff, how it works, though it was an abstinence-only curriculum of course, so no methods of birth control were officially discussed, but she answered questions and we got correct info about what condoms do and do not offer in terms of protection, and general confirmation that there are also other forms of birth control. Anyhow, here's where it went sideways. Last day, she said we can anonymously submit written questions to a box and she will answer them all truthfully. We work through the box until she gets to one that makes her turn red. She's not embarrassed, but she sees the danger. She tells us she's going to answer this question after the bell rings. Anyone who wants to know what the question is can stay and she'll read the question and answer it. Honestly, I was kind of embarrassed at the whole subject. I left when the bell rang. But it didn't matter, the whole school knew about it 20 seconds after she answered the question because the guys literally burst out of the room shouting the answer. The question, is it okay to masturbate? She said it was natural. She was fired that day. Edit, I forgot to mention, respect level went to 100% to that teacher when she did that. And screw that school. I teach 5th grade. This is the time for the big talk in Indiana. I was roughly about 7 months pregnant. I was unmarried but engaged. My fiancé was a pretty active participant in my classroom, so all the kids knew him. He came on the field trip due to not having a male teacher available to go to supervise the boys. In Indiana, we still teach abstinence only. In the middle of the lesson, the instructor basically tells the kids that conception takes place after sex, which can only happen after marriage. 30 seconds later, eyes are on me, and a hand shoots up. One of my fabulous tiny humans blurts out, "That can't be true. Mrs. Teacher isn't married and she is pregnant right now. How did that happen then?" I'm pretty sure the instructor would have killed me in that moment had she been able to. And this was my TED Talk on how I ruined the abstinence education by being pregnant and unmarried. I co-taught the week-long sex ed unit at my middle school because the science teachers, all older women, wanted a male presence. It was one of the best teaching experiences I ever had, and I honestly think it was some of the best teaching I have ever seen. Not gloating, I was a pretty crap teacher, which is why I quit. I did the put a question in the jar thing, but I actually answered most of them, especially if they had to do with coercion, interpersonal communication, or sexual assault. The ones that I didn't answer I kept because they were all hilarious. Some of my favorites were a series of questions about the sensory qualities of oral sex. Like one kid wrote, "What does butthole taste like? Does it taste like the Olive Garden?" And then there were variations on that theme, all naming different chain restaurants. Also, so many questions asking about cream pies. Edit, it was excruciating for some of the kids who were sitting in on the sex ed class, but in general I was so open with answering questions that by the end of the week I got really thoughtful and important ones. Besides kids who were name-checking things that had obviously already watched in porn, there were very few offensive or trolling questions.
Like and subscribe for more funny, interesting, and scary r/ask Reddit videos.